Hi everybody, it's Michael. I'm back again with another one of my walkthrough videos, and today I would like to show you Dungeon Lords. Dungeon Lords is a game from 2009. It's designed by Vlaada Chvátil, who also designed Mage Knight the board game, Through the Ages, Galaxy Trucker and so on. It's published by Czech Games Edition, and right here on the box says that it's for 2 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, and it plays in about 90 minutes. What's it about? Well, Dungeon Lords. If you know the video game from the 90s, Dungeon Keeper, then basically you know what this game is about. The players are Dungeon Lords, and they have to manage a dungeon, dig the tunnels, or rather have the imps dig the tunnels, hiring new imps, hiring monsters, feeding the monsters, training them for combat, building traps into the dungeon, building various rooms into the dungeon, and then finally at the end of each year the adventurers will come around trying to conquer the dungeon, which of course the players can't let happen. This is one of the games where basically everything builds towards this great thing at the end. In other games it's, I don't know, a fashion show. In this case it's the combat. And since everything basically works towards this one big thing at the end of the year, or rather you play for 2 years, so there's 2 rounds of combat, it might be a little bit hard to get this across in the video because you only see at the end where this is leading to. To mitigate this a little bit, the designer was clever enough to have like combat trainings in the rules. I won't show you these combat trainings, but I hope nevertheless that you will have a pretty good idea how this game is played, how the rules work, and how everything works together. I will show you a full 4-player game. There are rules for 2 and 3 players, but basically they work with a dummy player. I hope you enjoy the video. Have fun! I've set up a 4-player game, and as always before we start with the gameplay, let's take a brief look at all the different components. First of all, we have the progress board representing a whole year, separated into 4 different rounds or seasons. This up here is the Distant Lands board, which is basically just a placeholder for all the different things like wound markers, combat cards, adventurers, rooms and monsters. And as you can see, both adventurers and rooms and monsters come in a silver and a gold variant. Silver is for the first year and gold is for the second year. Down here we have the main board with stockpiles for the various resources like tunnels, gold, common cards again, and food. Over here we have a paladin who will enter a player's dungeon if he becomes too evil. Speaking of evil, here is the evil-o-meter, where the niceness or evilness of the different players is tracked, and everybody starts here. Down here we have a supply of imps and troll tokens, some traps, and finally we have 8 spaces where the players will place their minions to perform the various actions in the game. And then finally each player has their own personal dungeon board, and let's just take a brief look at the blue players. First of all, the blue player is the starting player, represented by this smiley token here. Then this dungeon area, where you build your tunnels and rooms. You already start out with 3 tunnels, heading down from the dungeon entrance. Up here, this is where the adventurers that try to conquer your dungeon will arrive, and this is basically all related to combat. This is your pantry, and you start with 3 food. This is your treasury, you start with 3 gold. These are your 3 minions who sit in your office. Then you start with 3 imps in the imp den. You don't have any traps yet, but they will be placed here. This is the prison where you will place incapacitated adventurers. And finally, this is your order planning area. You have 8 order cards, and in the first and basic game, you randomly draw 2 of the cards who are unavailable, and then you have another 6 to use in the first round. And finally, there are 2 reference cards, both related to the scoring at the end of the game. And then we can already start with the gameplay. So let's just move the progress marker 1 step forward to here. And now basically this kind of space is preparing the current round. So first of all we make 2 new rooms available. So we go over here to the Distant Lands board, take 2 rooms and place them down here on the main board with this nice impish looking real estate agent. So this one is a souvenir shop where imps can work to make money. And this one is a mushroom farm, I think, where imps can work to generate food. Next up are 3 monsters put into the underground tavern, which is down here. So we have a goblin, and another goblin, and a witch, and those will be available for the players to hire this round. Then we flip up the event token. There are 3 events at the end of the 2nd, 3rd and 4th round, so At this moment we'll already see the event that will happen at the end of the second round. And this one is taxation, where we have to pay for all our tunnels and rooms in the dungeon. And finally we have 4 adventurers that come out. So just one after the other, we'll put them into these 4 spaces left to right. So this one is a thief. Then we have a wizard, and they're of equal power because their runes look the same. And in that case we just keep the order. Then this one is a wizard, and its spot is fine because more powerful creatures are put further to the right. And then finally this is a warrior, and now we have to do it like this because the warrior is not as powerful as the wizard. And then we can move into the next phase where the players can plan their orders. Let's take a look at the order selection process for the blue player. He has to select 3 orders. Increased reputation and buying traps are not available at this point, so he's still left with hiring imps, getting food, digging for gold, digging new tunnels, hiring monsters, and acquiring rooms. And the thing is, for each action there are 3 spaces available. Once everybody has placed their orders, begin with the start player, and that is blue, the first order from everybody is revealed, and then in player order people put their minions on the first empty space that corresponds with that order. So for example, if I would dig tunnels as my first order, then starting with blue, 1 minion is placed on the first empty space on the dig tunnel action space. That means, for example, if I want to buy rooms, and we can see that none of the other players have the buy room card as their inaccessible order. That means that theoretically, if I put this down as my second order, it could happen that all other players put it down as their first order, and then I would be the fourth to try put a minion there, and that wouldn't work because there are only 3 spaces available. Also, and you'll see this later on, normally the second and the third space are more interesting than the first space because you get more. So it's again a problem. If you rush into a space too early, you might not get a benefit as good as the others. Okay, but for now, what does the blue player do? First, he would like to dig tunnels. This card is placed in the first slot face down. Then he would like to get a room. And finally, he would like to be able to hire imps. And the other players also make their choices. Then, in player order, everybody reveals their first card and places a minion there. So the blue player, as we know, wants to go to dig tunnels, so he moves here. The yellow player wants to get food. The green player wants to dig for gold. The red player wants to hire a monster. Then second actions, the blue player wants to get a room. The yellow player wants to hire imps. The green player wants to also recruit monsters. The red player wants to increase his reputation. And finally, the blue player also wants to hire imps. The yellow player wants to buy a trap. The green player wants to dig tunnels. And the red player wants to get food. And then we can resolve the actions going left to right and down here left to right again. So, getting food. The yellow player has to pay 1 gold to get 2 food. This minion is returned. He pays a gold to the supply, and he gets 2 food to put into his pantry. Then next, the red player has to gain 1 evil on the evil-o-meter, but then he gets 3 food. The red player can increase his reputation and pay a visit to the academy. First, increasing reputation means that you go down 1 on the evil-o-meter, basically just offsetting the gain he got before. And then he can take a peek at any of the 4 combat cards for the upcoming combat phase. And a combat card contains 2 pieces of information. First, a spell that will happen, and then also how much attrition the heroes or the adventurers will take. For now, let's just take this information as it is, and it'll become clearer later on. Then the blue player can dig up to 2 tunnels, so he can take 2 tunnels from the supply and place them anywhere in his dungeon where they are connected to other tunnels and they don't form a 2-on-2 grid. So for example, I couldn't place a tunnel here and I couldn't place tunnels like this because then we have a 2-on-2 grid. So what he actually decides is to do it like this. And each tunnel has to be dug by an imp, which we'll just indicate by placing them on here. So he has 1 imp remaining for later on. Next, the green player can dig up to 3 tunnels, but he chooses to only place 1, and we'll see in a second why he does that. Next up, he wants to dig for gold, and he can do this with 2 imps, so this is the reason why he wanted to keep some of them. And imps digging for gold are placed on tunnels, so you can only dig for gold in tunnels, and then each will give you 1 coin, so he receives 2 to put into his treasury. Next, the yellow player hires an imp by paying 1 food, and the imp is put into his imp den. Then the blue player can hire 2 imps by paying 2 food. Then the yellow player can buy a trap for 1 gold. The gold goes to the supply, and he just receives the top card from the trap deck, which is a firewall. And the trap goes into his trap room down here, face down, so nobody else knows what it is. Now, recruiting monsters is a little bit different, because as you can see, until now we resolved actions from the lowest number to the highest. But what we actually did, and I didn't tell you, is go from the shortest bar to the longest. And as you can see here, they're the other way around. So basically, although we place our minions following the numbers, we resolve the action from the bottom to the top, starting with the shortest bar. So this position is not taken. Here somebody could have paid a food to hire a monster. So the green player is next, and he can just take any of the monsters, but he has to pay their hiring cost. And he decides to take a goblin, which will cost him 1 food. The goblin goes face up into his monster den, and he pays 1 food to the supply. Next up is the red player, and he decides to take the witch, which will also cost him 1 food, but will also give him 1 increase on the evil-o-meter again. And then finally rooms. Rooms are also resolved in backwards order, but the blue player is the only one here. Here the thing is, there are only 2 rooms available, and each costs 1 gold. And if you come in last, you can get a room for free, but only if there's one still there. So the blue player was lucky here. And now basically he can choose any of these 2 rooms, but he decides to take this souvenir shop. To put a room into your dungeon, you have to replace an existing tunnel, and you can't put 2 rooms next to each other. That's not a problem right now. And also the rooms have an indication where they have to be. Since this is a souvenir shop, it has to be close to the entrance, so on the upper 2 levels. And so the blue player decides to put the room here, but the imp still stays on here because he was still busy digging that tunnel. Now that the action and order phase is resolved, we go back to the progress board, where we see that now room production is active. The blue player is the only one who has a room, and this room has to take 3 imps and then will produce a gold. He has 3 imps remaining, so they're just put on here, making and selling souvenirs to tourists, and he gets 1 gold. And then we get to take back our orders, and the way this works is that you get back the one in the first slot, the one that were inaccessible before, and then those 2 are moved up and are now inaccessible. And then it's already the end of the round, so the starting player token is advanced and everybody gets their imps back. So the starting player moves from the blue to the yellow player, and then we prepare the next round and put out new stuff. But first, everything that's still here is discarded, so this goblin is discarded, this room is discarded. They go into this respective spaces on the distant lands board. Then we get 2 new rooms. This one is a workshop for traps. This one is a chicken farm. 3 new monsters. We get a slime, a troll, and a ghost. Then the next event will normally be an event card, but since we're playing with the beginner rules, this one is just ignored, so there won't be an event at the end of the 3rd round. And then finally 4 new adventurers. A thief, priest, another thief, and then finally a warrior. And we have to put that one here, maintaining their order, but also looking at the order of the runes. And then we can move into the next order phase. For selecting the orders, let's just take a brief look again into the blue player's consideration. First, the upcoming event after this round is taxes, where you have to pay 1 money for 2 rooms or corridors rounded up. He currently has 5 tunnels and rooms, meaning that will cost him 3, and he has 4, so that should be sufficient. The thing is, he is last now, and nobody has the mining gold action inaccessible, so if he were to take it, he would risk that he wouldn't be able to actually perform it, so let's not do that. He could dig tunnels again, but that would put him over what he can actually afford tax-wise, so that's probably not a good idea either. So what he actually does is to hire a monster, get food because he's short on that, and hiring monsters will probably cost food. And then finally he could try and buy a trap, but this could end up costing him 2 money, and that is too risky because then he wouldn't be able to pay his taxes anymore. So he decides to go for increasing his reputation. And after we've selected and revealed the player orders, the action board looks like this. First, the blue player gets 2 food for 1 money. Then the yellow player, he increases his reputation. And then he can also look at any card. Let's just suppose he takes a look at the same card that red player did before. The blue player gets 2 increases. Then the red player may dig for 2 gold. So he decides to dig here and here. The yellow player can dig for 3. The green player can hire 1 imp for 1 food. Then the green player can buy 1 trap for 1 money. And he gets an anti-magic dart. The story is that the imps are very happy to sell the first trap, and in their happiness then they don't charge the second customer. And that is a poisoned meal. Then the blue player can hire a monster first, but he has to pay a food. And he decides to hire the troll, so that'll cost him 3 food altogether. And one of the troll's abilities is that he comes with a troll token that he can place with his imps and use it as if it were an imp, but only for production in the rooms. Then the red player can hire a monster, and he decides to take the ghost, which will give him yet another increase in evilness. And then finally the yellow player is left with picking the slime, which will cost him 1 food. And then finally the green player gets to choose a room, and he decides to take this trap building workshop. The trap building workshop has to go on the edge of the dungeon, so he decides to put it down here. Then for production, the blue player, and basically this can be played simultaneously, can produce 1 gold here with 3 imps, or 2 imps and a troll token, it doesn't matter. And although he still has 3 imps, or rather 2 imps and a troll token left, he can only activate his room once. The green player can use all 4 of his imps to build a trap in his workshop, and it's a poison dart. And then everybody gets back their orders. Then it's the event, taxes. So everybody has to pay 1 money for each 2 of their tunnels and rooms. So the yellow player has to pay 2. The green player has to pay 2. The red player has to pay 2. And the blue player has to pay 3. And next, the adventurers will start to arrive at the player's doorstep. So we take a look at the adventurers in spring. And now each player will get an adventurer from left to right, starting with the most not evil, or the nicest player. So the blue player receives this thief, and he will go into the foremost slot in front of the dungeon. Next up is the yellow player, so he receives this mage. Then the green player gets this warrior. And finally the red player gets this wizard, or mage. I think they're called wizards. Then everybody takes back their imps and we rotate the start player. And then we put out new stuff. A mint, and a tool shed, a vampire, a ghost, and another vampire. We flip up the final event, that is payday. Then we get 4 new adventurers. And then it's orders again. Okay, so the blue player would actually like to hire another monster because he only has 1. He doesn't have any food, which is not that big of a problem because none of the monsters available this turn require food. However, he's the 3rd player in line, and the green player and the red player don't have the recruiting monster card inaccessible. Even if you were to put down this higher monster card first, it could still happen that he ends up 3rd, and then he can't pay the food to actually hire the monster, so that's a bit risky. So what he actually decides instead is to dig tunnels, buy a trap, and dig for gold. And after the other players have decided, the action board looks like this. Tunneling and getting rooms have become very popular again, now that the tax paying is over. And we first start with the green player, who pays a gold to get 2 food. Then the red player digs 2 tunnels. The blue player digs 3 tunnels, but he decides to actually only put down 2 because he still wants to mine gold afterwards. He can't put 1 here because that would result in a 2x2 grid, so he puts 1 down here and 1 here. And then the yellow player may dig up to 4 tunnels, but he has to make 1 imp the 4 imp, so that one can't actually take part. So he has 4 imps available, 1 becomes the 4 imp, he has to play it on the entrance, and he's supervising the others, and then he can still dig up to 3 tunnels. Then the green player can dig for up to 2 gold. The blue player can dig for 3 gold. Then the green player can hire another imp by paying 1 food. The red player can hire 2 imps for 2 food. The blue player can buy a trap for 1 gold. And it's a trapdoor. The yellow player is the only one with the monsters, so he can hire 1 of them. And he decides to hire a vampire, which increases his evilness by 2. Then the yellow player is first to pick a room, but he has to pay 1 gold. And he decides to take the mint. The mint has to go into the 2 lower levels, so the only way to put it down somewhere is here. And then the red player gets the other room for free. It's the tool shed. It has to go on the outside, so he decides to put it down here into this freshly dug tunnel. Then we're up to production and retrieving order cards. The red player can send 2 of his imps into the tool shed to dig another tunnel, and he decides to put it out here. Then next up would be the next event, which in this case would be the event card. Since we're playing the basic game, we're not doing this. There simply doesn't happen anything at this point. But just to give you an example, let's just draw one of these event cards randomly. And this is desertion. Each player loses all imps that did not work this round. And then we're up to distributing adventurers again. The blue player is the nicest one, so he gets the thief, making that the second one. Then next up is the green player. He gets this warrior. And the warrior's special ability is that they always want to lead, and they always push back up to the front, even if that means that they move in front of another warrior. So basically, this warrior would now move in front. Then the yellow player is next, so he gets the priest. And then finally the red player gets this thief. Then everybody gets the imps back, and we rotate the starting player. Then we put out new stuff. It's only rooms and monsters this time, because we don't have any final events or adventurers. This one is, I think, a printing press or something where you can increase your reputation. And this one is the magic room where 2 imps and a nice meal can create a 3rd imp. And then we get another witch and a troll and a slime. And then we're back to orders again. The blue player is in a bit of a tough spot. We have a payday coming up, meaning that he'll have to pay the recruitment costs of all the monsters in his employ again. So that means that the troll will eat 2 food again, and he currently has none. So first thing is getting food. The green player has the food inaccessible, and since the blue player wants as many food as possible, and he is able to take the 2 evilness, because he's the lowest, he decides to place the food last. Then, he only has 1 monster currently, so it would be great to hire another one, but with the payday coming up, basically he would have to pay the costs twice, once for hiring the monster and once for the payday, and at most he can get 3 food. And of these 3 food, the troll will already eat 2. So even if he just hires the slime, that would make it another 2 food, and that he can't afford. So hiring a monster is out. He could build another room, and that's exactly what he does. So he puts the room down here. And then, since he can only send 1 monster into combat and he only has 1 trap, it would be pretty good to know what's going on with the combat cards, so he decides to increase his reputation first, hopefully getting a shot at picking at one of the cards. And this is how it looks like. So first, the red player pays 1 gold to get 2 food. Then the blue player gets 1 evil to get 3 food. Then the yellow player gets 2 evil to get 3 food and a gold. The blue player gets 1 reputation. And he's also able to look at any of the combat cards. He picks the first, but we already know what it is. The green player was hoping to also get a peek at the combat cards, but now all he gets is 2 reputation. Then he can dig tunnels up to 2. He has 5 imps available, but he still wants to produce a trap later on, so he only decides to dig 1 tunnel. Then yellow can buy a trap for 1 gold. A cursed ring. Red gets a trap for 3. A rolling stone. And green has to pay 2 gold to get 2 traps. Anti-magic dart. And a trapdoor. Then red can hire a monster first, and he decides to hire the troll. So that'll cost him 2 food. And then yellow has a bit of a choice, but actually he doesn't. He's already very close to the mark where he will attract the paladin. And actually, since the upkeep for the on the payday of the vampire will require him to get to evil, he will already hit the mark. So then it doesn't matter if he takes the witch, which will increase his evil even more, because with the paladin in his dungeon he has to get all the help he can. So he hires the witch, increases 1 by evilness, and has to pay a food. And then the blue player gets a room for free, and he decides to take the magic room. This one has to go into the center of the dungeon. He can't put it here because no 2 rooms can be next to each other, so he has to put it here. Then production. The yellow player can send his 3 imps into the wind to get a coin. The green player produces a trap, a kamikaze imp. The red player digs another tunnel over here. The blue player sends 3 of his imps into the souvenir shop, giving him a gold. And then he could send 2 imps into the magic room, but that will also require a food. He has 3, and the troll will eat 2 during the payday. And then during combat, he can use 1 to increase the troll's combat strength, and this is probably what he should do. So he saves the 3rd food and doesn't use the magic room. And then it's payday. The green player has 1 goblin, so he has to pay a food. The red player has to pay 3 food for the troll and the witch, and then gain 2 evil for the ghost and the witch. The blue player has to pay 2 food for the troll. The yellow player has to pay 2 food for the slime and the witch, and get a total of 3 evil for the vampire and the witch. And that puts him above the mark, so the paladin immediately ventures out to his dungeon and moves up in front. And then we get the final set of adventurers. The blue player and the green player are tied for being the nicest. However, the red player is the starting player, and the starting player is considered nicer than anybody else, and in consequence, everybody closer to the starting player is also considered nicer. So, blue is nicer than green, so blue gets this wizard, and green gets the other one. Then it's red, who gets the warrior, who pushes up in front, and then finally yellow will get this priest. And that is the end of the first year, so we can now move into combat. So I flipped over the progress board to become the combat board, and then to set up, we take the combat cards, keeping them in order and laying them out one after the other from left to right. And then we take our marker and can basically start with the first planning phase. Now planning is done simultaneously, but let's just start with what the blue player does. First of all, you have to designate the space in which the combat is taking place. And in the beginning, you don't have any choice because the adventurers enter from the entrance. So basically, this space will be the first that they try and conquer, and we mark this. But in the next round, for example, they will always try to conquer the spaces that are closest to the entrance. So basically, next round, we would have a choice between this one and this one. And since combat is taking place in a tunnel, I can place 1 trap and 1 monster. Okay, so the blue player only has 1 trap available. It would be a trap door. The first adventurer takes 2 damage. However, we have 2 thieves, so basically the 2 damage would be prevented by them, and then the conquering step would be skipped, and they would also get no fatigue. So it doesn't make any sense to play this right now. And then the blue player only has 1 monster to send, which is the troll, and he decides to send it and intends to beefing it up with 1 food, so the standard attack of 4 can kill the first thief. The green player decides just to play an anti-magic dart to prevent the wizard from casting the spell. The green player is the only one who doesn't know what the spell is, but since he can stop it, why not? The red player has a ghost, and since the ghost is no monster, he can send 1 monster and the ghost, and he decides to send the witch and the ghost, but not play any traps. Now everybody has planned their first combat round, so this card is revealed. It is a slow spell, so it will happen after monster's attack. It will require 1 magic power. It will give 2 fatigue. So basically what this does, it's a magic graffiti, and one of the minions has to take care and clean it away, meaning that one of your minions in the next order phase will not be able to work. And after we've revealed the card, we now go into performing the first round of combat. This is again done in player order, starting with the red player. First there would be the trap step, but the red player didn't play any. Then there would be the fast spell step. However, the current spell is a slow spell. And then the monsters. So the red player decided to send the witch and the ghost. And he can now decide who will attack first. The ghost can attack anybody for 2, but can't attack the first adventurer in line. And the witch can either attack the first one for 4 or any 2, and they can do the same for 1 each. He wouldn't be able to take out the warrior, for example, because the ghost can't attack him. He could have both the ghost and the witch go for the same one, and either eliminate the wizard before he can pull off the slow spell later on. But since he has still some traps left and he wants them to be effective next round, he decides to take out Thief in the back. So, ghost attacks first, does 2 damage. The witch attacks twice afterwards, also does 2 damage. He is eliminated and he's put into our little prison. Those 2 monsters are now basically tired and they can't attack this year any longer. So what is left is the troll. After that the slow spell happens. Since it's the spell in the first combat round, it requires 1 mana or magic. And the wizard has 2, so he provides enough for the spell being cast, so it takes its effect. Meaning that one of our minions has to be put on the first order space, and the card we will place there won't have any effect next year. Then there would be the healing step, but there are no priests. And then finally we have the fatigue step, meaning that the first adventurer in line will acquire 2 damage, so the warrior receives 2 damage. And afterwards the adventurers, if they're still alive, and they are, will conquer the current tile. So this is flipped over. It's now very light and bright because good is seeping in there. This tile is now unusable. The red player won't be able to build a room out of it. He can't mine it for gold. It still counts for taxes. And he got a little less evil, meaning that his cube on the evil-o-meter drops by 1. And that was the first round of combat for the red player. The blue player sent the troll, and he decides to spend a food to give him 4 attack on the first adventurer, meaning that he'll take out this thief. Then there's still a wizard left, so the slow spell gets through. No healing, and then fatigue, so the thief receives 2 damage. And then of course they conquer this tile, and the blue player gets even nicer. The yellow player decided to send the vampire, but didn't play a trap. So the first thing that happens is that the vampire can attack anybody for 3 or anybody for 2, and then still be available next combat round, but he can't attack priests. So what the yellow player does is he decides that the vampire should attack the wizard, take him out, and the vampire returns to the lair face down. Then we have the slow spell phase. Still has 2 magic points, so he's able to pull the graffiti spell off. And then we have fatigue and conquering. And then this tunnel is conquered. The green player has played a trap. It's the anti-magic dart. Deal 1 damage to the adventurer of his choice. If he's a wizard, the party casts no spells this round. 1 damage is put onto the wizard, and the trap gets discarded to the distant lands board. Then he didn't send a monster. The slow spell doesn't pull off. There's no healing, and then the warrior receives 2 fatigue. And the tile is conquered. And then everybody plans the second combat round. Fatigue will finish off the rogue. Do nothing further. The blue player is a little bit lucky because the wizard is not powerful enough to cast the magic shield, meaning that the fatigue will kill the thief, and afterwards the tile is conquered. The yellow player decided to send the witch. The paladin can still, with his 2 magic, cast the magic shield, which attacks for 4, which is then 3, which is just enough to take out the paladin. Afterwards there would be healing, but nobody's wounded, and then the first priest takes 1 fatigue, and this tile is conquered. The green player played a poison dart. He's allowed to deal 1 damage to the adventurer of his choice, and he chooses the wizard. And then at the end of the round, after the conquering, this adventurer will take 2 more damage. Then the goblin attacks for 2, meaning that he'll kill the warrior. And then the goblin's special ability is if he takes out the target of his attack, he gets so excited that he attacks again for 1. So the next warrior in line also gets a damage. And then the goblin retires. Then we don't have any healing. The warrior gets 1 fatigue. Then this tunnel is conquered. And then the effect of the poison dart kicks in, killing the wizard. And then we move into the 3rd round of combat. So we reveal the 3rd combat card. It's a Fist of Justice, which would make you lose 1 imp. But the thing is, nobody has wizards in their dungeon anymore that would be able to cast the spell. The red player basically didn't do anything. He didn't place his trap, he didn't have any monsters. So the only thing that happens is that luckily the 1 fatigue kills off the wizard. The room is not conquered because there's nobody left to conquer it, and so all adventurers are eliminated and the red player is done. He doesn't have to play through a 4th round of combat. The blue player played a trap. It's a trapdoor. The first adventurer takes 2 damage. Skip the conquering step and fatigue this round. Nothing more happens this round. The yellow player played a trap. Each adventurer takes 1 damage. Then the last one takes 1 additional damage. And now the curious thing is, the priests only heal if there was combat. There wasn't any combat, so they don't heal. Basically the backstory is that they have very strict contracts and very good lawyers. So the final thing that happens is that this priest gets 1 fatigue, then this tunnel is conquered. And finally the green player decided to play it safe by playing the trapdoor, which immediately with his 2 damage eliminates the warrior. So the green player is also already done with his combat. And then we move into the last round of combat. And the final combat card is a Word of Peace. For the blue player, basically the only thing that's happening is that the wizard succumbs to fatigue. The yellow player couldn't rely on the fatigue taking out the priests because they would have healed in between if there was combat. So he decided to put down the slime and the trap. First, the trap is a cursed ring. He has to pay 1 gold. But then each adventurer takes 1 damage and the conquering step would be skipped. So that point of damage takes out the first priest and the second one is now at 3 damage. And then the slime can use his ability to attack everybody for 1. Well, there's only 1 adventurer left, but he's also taken out. So the yellow player also finished his combat successfully. So to prepare for the 2nd year, put out the progress board again, shuffle the event markers, then the year 2 combat cards can be placed into the academy. We'll now use the golden stacks for everything, so basically all of this stuff can be discarded. And finally the start player moves 1 space to the right. And then we can start the winter phase again, so we get new rooms. This one is the anti-magic room. If combat takes place in there, spells won't work. This one is a labyrinth. You can place 2 traps in there and they don't cost gold. Normally it costs gold to put traps in rooms because you have to lure the adventurers over to the traps because rooms are so big. And you can only place 1 monster here, which is also unusual because normally you could play 2 monsters in 1 room. Then 3 new monsters. A golem, which can attack for 4 over and over again, but he requires a trap as part of his income. Then a troll and another golem. Next event will be taxes again, and then we get 4 new adventurers. And then it's orders again. Okay, so it looks like this. I've placed the minions whose actions won't be executed the other way around, so they still take up space, so we just take this one off. Then the red player gets nicer by 1 step and can also look at a combat card. This one is a magic key. It'll have 2 fatigue and one of the imprisoned adventurers would have to be discarded. The yellow player gets nicer by 2. Then the green player can dig up to 2 tunnels. The red player can dig 3 tunnels. The green player can mine 2 gold. The yellow player takes his minion back. The blue player takes his minion back. The yellow player can hire 2 imps for 2 food. The blue player gets to buy a trap. And now in the second tier, when you buy traps, you always get 1 more. And then from your whole hand, after you've added the new traps to your hand, you have to discard 1. So you get better choices. And this is a poison dart and a pendulum. But basically it doesn't really matter what he decides to pick up, because he wants to use it as a payment for a golem later on. The blue player is first to hire a monster, so he wants a golem, meaning that he has to pay a trap and a gold, and so does the green player. Then it's production. And what's also new in the second tier is that you can use each of your rooms twice. The blue player has 5 imps and a troll token remaining, so he can use all of them to produce 2 money. The same holds for the yellow player and his 6 imps. The green player doesn't have enough imps left to operate his trap building workshop. And the red player has 2 imps, meaning they can dig yet another tunnel. We return the imps and rotate the starting player, and we put out new stuff. The rooms are a room in which witches and vampires fight better, and another one in which trolls and goblins fight better, if combat takes place there, of course. Then we have a vampire, a demon, who as payment requires another monster to eat, and a goblin. The next event will be the payday, and then we get 4 new adventurers, and again, orders. Okay, here we go.
First, the yellow player pays gold to get the food, then the blue player gets a little bit more evil to get free food, and then the green player gets really evil for 3 food and 1 gold. Then the blue player digs for 2 gold, the green player for 3, and then the blue player for 4 wood and 4 imp. Then the blue player can hire 1 imp for 1 food, the green player can hire 2 imps for 2 food.
The yellow player gets to buy a trap for 1 gold, and he has a choice of a kamikaze imp and a firewall. He decides to take the kamikaze imp. The red player can hire a monster. He doesn't have any food, so he can't take the goblin. He actually decides to hire the demon, so that gives him 1 evil. And then he has to select 1 monster to feed to the demon, and he selects the troll. The yellow player can buy a room for 1 gold. He decides to pick the dark room, where his vampire and witch will be able to fight better, and he decides to put it over here. And then the red player gets the other room for free. Right now this doesn't agree with his monster selection, but it's a room anyway, so it'll be worth points at the end of the game. And he decides to put it down here. Then production.
The yellow player can produce 2 gold. The blue player only has 5 imps and trolls remaining, so he uses 3 of them to produce 1 gold.
And then he could use these 2 imps over here to create a 3rd one, but the food that would be required, he needs that one to pay the troll's wage later on the payday. So these 2 imps just do nothing. The green player can produce 1 trap, and it's still only 1 trap. The thing where you can get an extra card and then choose only holds for buying traps and not producing them. And he gets a poison dart. And then taxes. The blue player has 7 tunnels and rooms. That means he has to pay 4 gold. The red player has 11, so that's 6 gold, which he just has. The green player has 7, so that's 4 gold. And then the yellow player has 6, but he only has 2 gold remaining, so he pays those. And then for each missing gold, you have to take a damage cube, put it into your office, and it'll be worth -3 points at the end of the game. On the other hand, he got a very nice room for the 1 gold investment that he's now missing, so hopefully that'll make up for it somehow. On a second thought, the red player will decide to keep 1 gold and also get a -3 marker.
And then we select the adventurers again. Blue player is the nicest, so he gets the thief, so it's green. So he gets the priest. Then red and yellow are tied, but red's starting player, so he gets the wizard. And then the yellow player receives the priest. And then we rotate the starting bed and take it out.
Then new stuff is put out. This is a room that gives you extra points for any demons, golems, and dragons. And this one gives you extra points for witches, slimes, trolls, and goblins. Then we have another demon, a dragon, and finally a slime. The final event is nothing, and 4 new adventurers. And then it's orders again. So first the red player gets 2 food for 1 gold. Then he gets an increase in reputation. And you can also take a look at the card. He has already seen the first card, so let's take a look at the second one. Careful not to disturb the order. That's a fast spell, the Aura of Fear. To fatigue, withdraw 1 monster from combat. This is also not too nice, but at least now he knows. The blue player can buy 1 trap, and he gets a choice between a pendulum and a kamikaze imp, and he chooses the pendulum. The green player gets a trap for free. His choices are the poisoned meal and the anti-magic dart. And he picks the dart. The red player can hire a monster. He decides to take the slime, which will cost him 1 food. The green player can buy a room, and he decides to pick this one and put it down here. And then the blue player gets the other room for free, and he decides to put it down here.
Then production, the green player produces a trap, and he gets fireball. The red player can dig 2 tiles, so he can put 1 here and 1 here, for example. And the blue player can produce 1 gold. Again, food that he could use here is still needed for payday.
And then it's payday. The yellow player has to pay 2 food, and he has to gain 3 evil. The green player has to pay a food, a gold, and a trap. The red player has to pay 1 food for the witch. The demon eats a monster. He selects to eat the slime, meaning that the slime doesn't have to get paid. And then he gets also 3 evil. And so far, nobody has attracted the paladin yet. And the blue player has to pay 2 food, 1 gold, and a trap.
Then the adventures are distributed. Blue gets the warrior, who moves up front. Green also gets the warrior. Then yellow gets the thief. And finally red gets priest. Then star player and prince.
And then we move into the last round, where we get a room that awards for ghosts and vampires, and also a trophy room. There are certain awards that you can get at the end of the game, certain titles, and they give you points, but if you have the trophy room, they give you even more points. And then for our last 3 monsters, we have a dragon, a ghost, and a witch. And the final time, we prepare our orders. The yellow player buys 1 trap, so he takes the pendulum. Then the red player gets a trap for free. He takes the trap zone. The blue player can hire a monster. He's paying his last food for the effect here, so the only thing he can hire is the ghost. Then the green player decides to hire the dragon. And then finally the yellow player can hire the witch. Then the yellow player can build a room, and he decides to take this one, and he has to put it over here. And the red player picks the other one and puts it over here. And then the green player doesn't get anything.
Then production, one last time. The blue player takes 3 items and another 3 items to produce 2 gold. Yellow player does the same. Green player produces yet another trap, a cast ring, and red player just takes another tunnel.
Event phase, nothing happens. And then one last time we distribute adventurers.
Blue player gets the wizard. The green player gets the warrior, who pushes up front past all the others. Then yellow and red are tied, but yellow is the starting player, so he gets this wizard, who also pushes up to the front. And finally red gets this wizard.
And then we take back our imps and start the last combat. So everybody does their planning. Then the combat card is the magic key. So now let's start with the combat of the yellow player. He had to choose this space because it's the only one that is 2 away and not conquered. The yellow player decided to place a trap. It's a kamikaze imp. He has to pay 1 imp. And then the first adventurer will take 3 damage and the others take 1. So he pays 1 imp. The 3 damage on the first adventurer are prevented by the rogue. So it just looks like this. Then we don't have any spells because there are no wizards. There is no healing because no combat took place because he didn't send a monster. And after that it's fatigue and conquering. 2 fatigue go on the warrior. And then this tunnel here is conquered. For the green player, we first also have a kamikaze imp. So 1 imp goes away. The warrior gets 3 damage and the other 2 get 1 each. Then we don't have any spells. And then the dragon attacks everybody for 2. And then the healing step is skipped because basically the priests are on fire. So the dragon returns to the lair face down. We have no healing. And then we have fatigue and conquering. The 2 fatigue finish off the wizard. And then this space here is conquered. For the red player, no fast spell. And then the demon can attack anybody for 7. So he decides to take out the priest. And because the party is so shocked by this, there won't be fatigue and conquering this round. The demon goes away. Unfortunately, there's still lots of wizards remaining. The slow spell is triggered, which means that one of the adventurers has to be discarded. The blue player send a ghost and a troll. So let's first do the 2 damage for the ghost. He can attack anybody but the first person. So he decides to attack the wizard for 2. And then the troll attacks the warrior in front for 3 damage. Then the spell triggers because of the wizard. So 1 adventurer is freed. And then the 2 fatigue will finish off the warrior. And the space here will be conquered. Then planning for the second round of combat. Then we reveal the spell. This one is an aura of fear. 1 monster has to be withdrawn from combat and 2 fatigue. The yellow player decided that the combat would take place in this room, so his witches and vampires will have +1, and also since the room there's enough space to send 2 monsters. We don't have a trap, we don't have a spell because there's no wizard, and first of all the witch attacks, and with her second attack she now does 2 damage with each attack, so she can take out the priest. And after that the slime can do his second attack, which basically says that he slimes everybody, so there will be no fatigue or conquest this turn. And that means that we're basically done. There is no healing because there's no priest left, and no fatigue and no conquest. The green player had to choose this tunnel tile because it's the only unconquered space that is left that's only 2 away from the entrance. Okay, so first we have a trap. Each adventurer takes 1 damage, the last one takes 1 additional damage. That's 1 for the warrior, 2 for the priest, taking him out. And then the goblin can attack for 2, which means that he also takes out the warrior. So he's already done with combat. For the red player, first we have the fast spell, and that is the Aura of Fear. So he has to withdraw 1 monster from combat. The ghost isn't a monster, as we remember, so the witch has to withdraw, meaning that she can attack next combat round, but just not this round. Then the ghost can't attack the first adventurer, but he can attack the second one for 2. Then there's no healing, we don't have a slow spell, and then the space is conquered. And this wizard receives 2 fatigue. And finally for the blue player, he also has to withdraw 1 monster, and he only sent the golem, so that one just goes back. Then there's no healing, so basically this one here is conquered. And the thief gets 2 fatigue. And then we can move into the third round of combat. Okay, then the third combat card is Regeneration. Each wounded adventurer heals 1 hit point, and there's only 1 fatigue. The yellow player decided to fight in the dark room again, and he sent both a vampire and a witch. We don't have any traps, we don't have a fast spell, so let's attack with the vampire first. He gets +1, so this attack is now 4, and he can attack anyone with it, so he can take out the rogue. And then the witch, her attack is at 5, so she does 5 damage to the wizard, almost killing him. There's no healing, but there's fatigue, and that fatigue gives the last 1 damage that the warrior needs. So this room is not conquered, and combat is over for the yellow player. The red player sent a witch, and he decides to use her attack to take out the first wizard, and then he doesn't have any monsters left. Then the slow spell pulls off, so the wizard is healed by 1 hit point. Then there's fatigue in the conquering already, so he just gets 1 point of damage, and this tunnel is conquered. The blue player sends the golem against the thief, killing him. The golem stays face up, which is a special ability. Then there would be the slow spell, but right now it would require 3 mana, and the wizard is not powerful enough, so he simply takes 1 point of fatigue, and this tunnel is conquered. Okay, final round of combat. Create food. The first adventurer gains an extra hit point, even if undamaged, but it doesn't really matter because nobody has a wizard left that could cast the spell, and we have 2 fatigue. The red player decided not to do anything, so basically all that happens is that this adventurer acquires 2 fatigue, then conquers this tunnel, and then since it's the last combat round, he just escapes to the distant landboard. The blue player sent the golem again, and this time it kills the wizard. And then the game is basically over, so we can go into the scoring. And for that we can just use the combat board again because there's a track. Okay, so first of all, each monster, but not ghost, gives 1 point. So the blue player gets 2 points, the red player gets 2 points, the green player gets 3 points, and the yellow player gets 4 points. Then each unconquered room gives +2, so the blue player gets 6 points, and so does the red player. The green player gets 4, and the yellow player gets 6. Then each imprisoned adventurer gives 2, the blue player gets 10, the red player gets 8, the green player gets 12, and the yellow player also gets 12. Then each imprisoned paladin gives +5, so the yellow player gets 5 points. Then each conquered dungeon tile costs -2, so the blue player loses 10 points, and so does the red player. The green player loses 6, and the yellow player loses 8. Then each unpaid tax costs -3. The yellow player loses 3 points, and so does the red player. Then point scoring rooms. The blue player has this room which gives him 1 point for witches, trolls, goblins and slimes. He has 1 troll, so that's 1 point. The green player gets 2 points for demons, dragons and golems. He has a dragon and a golem, so that's 4 points. And the yellow player gets 2 points for each vampire and ghost, so that's 2 points for the vampire. But then we have certain titles, and they can either be exclusive or shared. So let's take a look. The Lord of Dark Deeds is the one who is highest on the evil-o-meter. That is the yellow player, so that is an exclusive title for him, meaning he gets 3 points. The Lord of Halls, most rooms. It doesn't matter whether they're conquered and unconquered. The red player has 3, and so does the blue player. So it's a shared title for both of them, so they both get 2 points. The Tunnel Lord, the most tunnels, unconquered and conquered. That is without any doubt the red player. So that's an exclusive title plus 3. But he also has a trophy room where each exclusive title gives him another 2 points, so that's 5 for him. Then the Monster Lord, whoever has the most monsters, not ghosts, is the yellow player with 4 monsters. The Lord of Imps, whoever has the most imps, that is the blue player with 7 imps. The Lord of Riches, whoever has the most food, gold and unused traps remaining. The blue player has 3 gold. The yellow player has 2 gold and 1 trap, so they're basically even. The green player has 2 food and 2 traps, and the red player has 2 traps and a gold, so the green player is the Lord of Riches. And then finally we have the Battle Lord, the fewest conquered dungeon tiles, and that is also the green player with 3. So the yellow player wins, then the green player, and then blue and red. And that was 1 full game of Dungeon Lords. I hope you enjoyed the overview of Dungeon Lords. Hopefully I could show you how the game plays like, how the various different mechanisms all work with each other, and how basically everything builds up to this big combat at the end of the first and second year. The combat is basically what you're working towards for. There's lots of points to be made there, either with capturing adventures, but also making sure that your dungeon doesn't get totally stormed. On the other hand, it's not only about the combat. I mean, there is this building of your dungeon, the economic elements. You have to save up for the taxes, you have to feed your monsters. Of course, there is luck in it, but I think it can be mitigated if you know what you're doing. And also, I think it's kind of fun. So hopefully by now you know whether this is something for you as well. Then until next time, thanks for watching and bye bye.